Welcome back to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies.
My name is Micaiah.
And my name is Kyle. This is a Movie of the Week style podcast where we take turns picking films. We talk about their context and quality. This week, I have selected the 2010 Best Picture winner, The Hurt Locker. Hurt Locker follows three soldiers in an explosive ordnance disposal or EOD unit over the last month and a half of their tour in 2004 during the Iraq War. Go ahead. All you.
What? All me.
All you.
You want me to read the facts or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, why not? Let's mix it up.
Okay, yeah. The film received massive critical acclaim, earning 9 Oscar nominations and won 6 of those. Directed by Catherine Bigelow, starring Jeremy Renner, Anthony Mackie. Forget his first name. Garrity is the third of them, of the main characters.
The third of them. The third of them.
He kind of feels like the third guy in the situation.
Just scream specialist, because they often do.
Yeah, specialist. And won Best Picture. And it wasn't a huge success, financially. It's actually one of the lowest grossing Best Picture movies. Winners, as far as like recorded box office goes, at the time it was the lowest. In the streaming era, there have been some, that have come in lower than it since then, but it still only made $49.26 million at the worldwide box office on a $15 million production budget. Not a flop, but not a hit. So, yeah, and nobody really saw it in theaters. I did well on, physical media sales and stuff afterwards, but
yeah, especially given winning 6 Oscars and being considered one of the best war movies at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that has something to do with it as well.
For sure, definitely. But yeah, you picked this movie for what reason?
I picked this movie because Veterans Day is the week that this comes out, but also I wanted to pick a Best Picture winner that we can agree on.
That wasn't Crash.
That wasn't Crash.
Because we agreed on Crash.
Oh, sure. That we can agree is good is what I mean.
Yeah. This is a good movie.
That we can agree is well deserved, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, 2009 was the first year that they expanded to 10 categories, or 10 nominees for Best Picture.
And I would say there are a few that I haven't seen. But what I would say is there's not a lot that I would put above Hurt Locker if I were to.
Same.
I think Best Picture takes into account like the momentum as well as the greatness of it, not necessarily like the better parts of it. I would say Inglourious Bastards I could see winning above it and I wouldn't be sad. Even so, Best Picture is so weirdly put together when it's all said and done. I wouldn't have been surprised if Avatar had won, specifically because of what's going around it.
I'll just read out this Best Picture lineup because it's kind of all over the place.
It is.
But you got Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9, An Education, Inglourious Bastards, Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Which, okay, I'll get around to it. But A Serious Man, Up in the Air, and The Hurt Locker, which won, obviously. And of those, like Avatar was a juggernaut and it was undeniable. I don't blame that one. The Blind Side, I don't know what The Blind Side is doing there, honestly. But whatever. It is what it is. People liked that movie when it came out. District 9 is great. Not what I would expect to see here, but that's, I think, a beneficiary of the expanded category.
The 10 rule, yeah.
Yeah. An Education is one of the couple I haven't seen here. Indie drama. I've heard good things, but I've just not seen it. Inglourious Bastards, obviously, at this point, one of, Quentin Tarantino's more highly regarded films. And, I think it's great. I don't know if I would say it's better or worse than The Hurt Locker, though. I think they're kind of on a similar level.
They are.
I haven't seen Precious. Precious is mostly a joke at this point, which is kind of sad because it's just the title is ridiculous. Precious, based on the novel Push by Sapphire. Like, you don't have to include that, Lee Daniels.
I think there were even... I think there were even jokes about like every single one of the movies in the Best Picture. It's like The Hurt Locker, based on the novel Push by Sapphire.
Right.
Kind of thing. So they just add based on the novel Push by Sapphire. it just to the title of everything. That was kind of the joke from the time.
Yeah, Lee Daniels is always questionable with his naming of stuff. Usually he puts his own name on it, like Lee Daniels the
Yeah, Lee
Butler.
Daniels the butler.
His um
Which you would think Lee Daniels would be the butler, but no, Lee Daniels is not the butler.
Yeah, his Billie Holiday movie, which came out a couple years ago, is awful. So, but that did get a nomination for the actress, and she deserved that. She's very good in the movie, but it was a terrible movie
Lee
to the
Daniels,
point.
not so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. But either way, I haven't seen Precious, so I can't really say anything about it. A Serious Man, the Coen Brothers movie, is fantastic. That one and Up, I think, are my two favorites of this group. And Up in the Air is also great. Also, I think a beneficiary of the expanded category. Um,
The things that I would say for Up, I would say I think it deserves the nomination. I think it deserves the nod, but there are like I can point to Ratatouille, The Incredibles, and Wall-E as ones that I would think would be Best Picture nominees before this, and that's
yes.
due to the 10 rule.
Yeah, Wally and The Dark Knight the previous year are cited mostly as the reason for the expanded category because
Right.
movies like that were left out.
Wait,
And
The Dark
especially
Knight wasn't nominated?
The Dark Knight was not nominated for Best
That is
Picture.
insane to me.
Right, and it's kind of crazy, like thinking about its cultural impact and its acclaim at the year it came out that it wasn't nominated, but it would have been if they had expanded to 10. But
Oh,
um,
most certainly.
that's why they expanded to 10 though, because also like independent movies have now firmly established themselves at this point in time as like the dominating demographic of films for the Academy, and so it means that the movies getting celebrated are the ones that people haven't seen as much. So I
Take
think it
The
was
Hurt Locker,
also
for instance,
right.
and we bring it all the way back around.
And yeah, back to The Hurt Locker because nobody really saw it in theaters. But
Nope.
um, yeah, no. General thoughts on this one though. I'd not seen it. I'd owned this movie for I don't know several years. It's been in my collection, but I'm not really drawn to watch war movies that much. I got it like secondhand somewhere for like $5. I was like, I'll watch it someday, and just never did. So I'm glad that you picked it because once again you're good at picking things that I've been meaning to watch. So
Haha.
this is one of those, and it's
Thank
as
you,
far
Makai,
as
for sending me the list of things that you haven't seen beforehand.
did I ever do that?
No, you did not.
I was about to say
I was
don't
giving you
remember doing
credit. Take the credit and roll with it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Okay, I don't know really anything about military. I am, as far as war movies go, I like the ones more that focus on character more so than the actual war stuff, and this fits in with that. I think.
Yeah, this definitely does that.
Right.
That's a good way to describe it. It focuses on character and story above realism. That's going to be a shocking statement to some people that it is not realistic, but when
Given
it
the
comes
stylistic
to the
aspect.
given the stylistic aspect, the explosions are very realistic given it's plastic explosives instead of like a firebomb kind of
Yeah.
thing.
It's very documentary style as well.
Yep. It is also very, yeah, I would say documentary or like more of like that kind of gritty shaky cam kind of
Right.
that
I
you
mean,
would
it's
find.
not done like a documentary. It's not like they're
No.
trying to pass it off as a documentary. It's more like the type of camera movements. The cinematographer.
It's not like The Office where they pull specialists aside and they're like, I don't like the hazing that they do for me. It's not like that.
The cinematographer is Barry Ackroyd, who works with Paul Greengrass a lot, who's known for that kind of docu style to his filmmaking with like United 93, Captain Phillips, same cinematographer. So that's his kind of style and stamp for sure. But yeah, no, this is a great movie though. Like as a movie, this is a great movie.
Definitely well made. Extremely well made.
Suspenseful. Yeah. Extremely suspenseful. It is we kind of talked about this in Untouchables, but in the second half of Untouchables, the sequences are really beautiful, perfect sequences to me that kind of sideline some of the other aspects of the storytelling of the movie in favor of the sequences. This movie is just a string of sequences with like basically intermissions between them where they're kind of back at base,
Yeah.
um and those sequences, if they weren't good, this movie would just fall flat. But those sequences are intense and they're tight, and yeah, you just really get your palms sweaty watching
Knees weak, arms are heavy.
him. Yeah.
Mom's
Yeah.
spaghetti.
But have you've seen this before? Yeah.
So yeah, I did see this in theaters. I was young at the time, but I don't think that mattered all that much. I didn't think much of it. I liked, of course, when you're young, you see things through a different light. The way that I view it then and the way that I view it now are very different. When I viewed it then, it was cool and it was gritty, but I didn't think much of it. When I view it now, I view it as it's a little bit weird to me because I like a lot of this movie. I really like this movie,
Yeah.
but I can't help but notice the flaws in specifically I don't have a problem with the military inaccuracies that don't involve the writing. So what I would say there is Staff Sergeant James absolutely should have been like chewed out for everything that he did. And
Oh my
it
gosh,
would
there's so
eventually
much.
build up, and I think it would eventually have led to a dishonorable discharge. But
Well, yeah, especially with the one scene where he leaves
the
base.
one, yes.
Like that in
So
particular.
this is the moment where I'm going to bring up. I asked our mutual friend Drew. He is in the military. He is in the army. So I wanted to get his aspect of this because Micaiah and I are not in the military, never have been, never seen combat, that kind of thing. We wouldn't.
I never desire to be either.
We
So
never. Yes, we. Not a lot of people do, but we wouldn't know what to think of this. We would see this movie as civilians. So, and that's kind of the way that this movie was shot. So, I wanted to get another aspect of it. And the thing that Drew says is most of it is good because of the fact that it's made for civilians, so you got to take that into account, which I think is fair. But some of the things just don't make sense. Like like Staff Sergeant James leaving the base, basically hijacking a car to be taken to a house, breaking into that house, coming back, being detained rightfully because he is attempting to enter the base after basically curfew, a military curfew, you could call it. And he gets stopped, and his password basically to get back into the base is I was at a whorehouse, which is crazy because that would not fly anywhere near it. And that's one thing. The other thing I would note is specifically the three men going rogue and trying to figure out the what becomes of the bombing that had already happened that they are just supposed to analyze as EOD techs. So breaking off and becoming vigilantes with no communication whatsoever to higher ups
right.
or backup. If they get into a scuffle, which they do, there is no backup for them. So, which is crazy because why would you not at least check and see if it's okay to do this or if it's okay to at least have backup while you do this? It's crazy that they go off, they get him, they specialist Eldridge gets shot. Yeah, Eldridge gets shot in the leg by one either James or Sanborn, and then and then everything gets played off as if it's fine. That's the main problems that I have with the writing. What I would say is the things like incorrect patches or incorrect uniforms, those are okay. Those are nitpicks more so than anything else. But I
Yeah.
can't view this movie without bringing up the fact that it gets so many things wrong with the strategic aspect of what the military is there to do.
Yeah, and if like that sequence where they leave and Eldridge gets shot and everything, like if Eldridge didn't get shot and they made it back and they were like unharmed, but like, they, still had the same emotional arc from that because of, we can get into that later. But if there weren't like immediate consequence that they would have to be like, oh, how did you get shot?
Yeah.
You know, that would lead to the reveal of like, oh, well, you shouldn't have done this. You're in trouble
Yes.
now. Like, he gets shot, he gets helicoptered away. You
No
know, did they
questions
not have
asked.
to like fill a
Yeah.
report or
No
anything? No
question.
questions. So
Which it even sets up in the movie with Guy Pearce's character Thompson getting killed. There is some like back and forth for like the logistics of what would happen. His um everything that's left with him, his personal belongings are shipped back, and there's that kind of feeling that it's all logistics at that point, which is sad, but it kind of forgets that at the end of the movie. So
yeah,
there would be questions, there would be like statements that need to be made based on that. So uh that's all I wanted to bring up.
yeah,
And I another thing I wanted to bring up is just the view that veterans have on this movie is not good. And I don't we don't speak for all veterans, we speak for the people who have spoken out. And they say that this movie is not very realistic, is all I'll say.
yeah. It was one of the first movies to depict the Iraq War, and with that, I guess, comes that first out of the gate, maybe not the most accurate kind of situation.
Yeah, there's not often a lot of things are still yet to be seen how exactly it went on, but what I will say is this movie was written by a journalist who actually went there and was in Iraq for I think it was 3 weeks. So seeing firsthand that kind of thing, it does give you an air of like, oh, so I know what's going on kind of thing. And that's what I
Yeah,
suspect. Whether he meant to or not, Mark Bull, I think he felt like a need to write something about this, but I don't think he had all the facts at the time, which as
yeah.
a journalist I would want.
Because apparently, yeah, he was going to write a journalist thing, but then he thought there was more
Yeah.
to it, so he then pitched it as a script, or he made a script for it, and then that got to Catherine Bigelow, and she wanted to
I
do it.
suspect I suspect the damage that was done is more nuanced than what you expect. So if I had seen this movie, especially pretty young, if I had seen this when I was like 18 or something like that, wanting to be in the military, this would make me want to be an EOD tech. So
It would make you want to
it
be
would
one.
make you want to be an EOD tech.
I didn't get that feeling at all.
Some people would. So and especially when you're enlisting and when like people ask you, "Oh, why do you want to be an EOD tech?" It's pretty straightforward. That I it's more of like the people wanting the thrills than the EOD techs that are actually there seeking the thrills, if that makes sense. So it's the
Yeah,
civilians coming in thinking that it's going to be all adrenaline rushes and that kind of thing, but I suspect EOD techs in their own way they're very methodical and it's all about conformity for safety. So
right.
when IEDs are approached, they're not approached just like putting on the suit and going or like taking off the suit and just going. It's
Yeah,
it's more so very methodical. There's a security, there's a perimeter put around the IED, safe distance, which they go over in this movie. Not very much, but they go over in this movie. But and then every most of the things are handled by robots. So that way we don't
yeah,
put that way they don't put a human in harm's way kind of thing.
right.
And
Yeah, yeah. This movie is definitely more interested in the psychological effects of war. I don't think it has. I don't think it presents too much of like a perspective on, um, good or bad. Like,
sure.
was this like because there are plenty of films that are like war is evil, and it's evil that we did these things, and there's plenty of war films that feel like hero worship, and I think this movie does ride the line pretty well between those two things. I think it's definitely, like we said, it's more of a character war movie rather than like a
It
realistic
definitely
style war
is.
movie,
It definitely is.
because you get these three characters. You get the Jeremy Renner, who's kind of addicted to the adrenaline of it, and is he's a little bit of a wild card and a little bit of a cowboy almost, kind of doing his own thing. And then you have the Anthony Mackie character who's very by the book, very reserved, you know?
Well, it said he was in intelligence for 7 years before he chose EOD.
Yeah.
So he at least knows how to read people at the
Yeah.
very least. So yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the third one, Eldritch, who's clearly very impressionistic. Like he kind of sways between the two in kind of like his own perspective.
Yeah, he's definitely the greenest of the three, but he's already seen his
Right.
fair share, so it's
Yeah.
kind of stuck with him. It felt like to me that Eldridge is kind of in between Sanborn and James when
Yeah.
it comes to going down that path. So
Right.
that's what
Like
I
he
got.
could go either way. Like it felt
Yeah.
like how that was going, whichever way he was going to end up going with that was going to be determined by the events of the movie. And that I think turns out to be true.
Yeah, every story has their grounded character for the audience, and I would say Eldridge is that character.
Yeah, he fits that kind of role here, even though it's usually in a movie, it's told through that character's eyes. And I think this movie very smartly just lets that character be part of it,
Yep.
you know, part of the trio there, rather than trying to make him the protagonist of sorts.
Yeah. I wouldn't say there is a protagonist in this movie.
No.
Jeremy Renner probably is the closest, especially since after.
He's definitely the lead.
Yeah, I would say he's the lead, but the protagonist itself might be the war itself. I would.
Well,
yeah,
the war is the protagonist,
or
like,
just
I mean, I guess
the atmosphere of it, maybe.
Right. I guess there's not really like an objective here. It's just the objective of it is really just seemingly to survive because it has like a countdown of like the days until the end of the tour. So it's like we just got to make it to the end of the tour. It's not like, and that's honestly a common thing with Iraq war stuff in general, is that what was the end goal there is kind of like always a big question. Like how long was this going to continue, and what was going to come of it? And in the end, not really much of anything. And I think that this movie being kind of an earlier version of that depiction of that war, I think that it kind of appropriately manages to tell that kind of story of a war that doesn't really have something that it's leading to.
Yeah, what I like is the back and forth between Sanborn and Eldridge. It's like, how many days do we have left? 23. Well, 22 if we survive today. It's always if we survive today,
Right.
we have one less or one
Right.
fewer. I really like that back and forth. My qualms with characters is mostly with James, but I really like Sanborn and Eldridge in this movie, like quite a bit.
And Renner is great.
Oh, Renner is
James.
phenomenal.
Like Renner's one of these actors. I've always liked Renner, but he kind of gets put in these supporting roles or these action hero roles, and I think he's good in those roles. But I think that there's a lot more when, like in this, and his other nomination that he got was for The Town, where he gets to play kind of more
Also a good
wild
character,
card
maybe.
characters. Yeah, I think that he's really great at playing, more complex characters than what he's usually given. Because I think they kind of, for a while, they were like, he's your next leading man. And then everybody was like, he's not quite our leading man kind of guy. But I think he's a really great performer. And I love seeing a role like this.
Isn't that partially why a studio didn't pick this up? Because Jeremy Renner was too unknown? I think I read that somewhere.
I honestly, I don't know.
I wouldn't say that's 100% true just yet, but I think I read that somewhere. So it would make sense. It's a bit like Bruce Campbell with Darkman. But
yeah.
And that's always a thing that studios look for. They look for selling points, and selling points are typically actors. So
yeah, Renner was in like a Dahmer movie before this, which is actually why Catherine Bigelow wanted him for this role, because he thought he could portray the complexity of this character.
Yeah.
And like Anthony Mackie had actually been in a few more prominent things like 8 Mile and $1 Million Baby.
Isn't it funny that the first squad is Eldridge Killian and the Falcon, and then the second is Hawkeye and the Falcon?
I mean, at this point, pointing out that people have been in Marvel movies is
that's
like
fair.
Pointing out that actors exist.
Well, they're early Marvel movies, at least. All of them are. I mean, all of them are either in. Well, Renner and Guy Pearce are in the first phase, so it does get a little bit more like. the more actors that are in MCU movies, it's kind of like eventually everyone's in an MCU movie.
Right. It's like, oh, look at all these actors. They were like all these different Marvel characters. I'm like, well, there's about 100,000 people in the Marvel movies. So
Yeah, what is it?
maybe,
Oh shoot, what is it?
maybe it's more likely that we don't have more than one Marvel
In
actor
Scott
in
Pilgrim versus the
movies.
World, he headbutts Superman, outsmarts Captain America, and dates Captain Marvel. So, yeah,
That's true.
all that is true.
Yeah.
Circling back, where were we?
Yeah, Eldritch plays God of War. Not God of War,
Gears
Gears of War.
He plays God.
Sorry, I messed that up. Same
That's
era
pretty
of
close.
gaming on an Xbox 360, you know? I thought that was neat.
Yeah, very 2007, man. I remember. Oh, 2007, so long ago, and yet so
Yeah.
close.
But yeah, I think that the movie has like some interesting like I said about its perspective on war and like the perspective of the soldiers within it. Like we said, there's not like a lot of there's some inaccuracies with the representation of specifically the James character and consequences or lack thereof.
Which for that I'd like to bring up, that doesn't necessarily mean quality, because I can point to House MD and
Right.
like look at Grey's Anatomy. Not very realistic at all, but well beloved.
No.
But they aren't well
Right.
beloved by doctors.
No. No. It's just I think that the reason that people have qualms with it from that perspective is because the movie is presented in such a grounded way.
Yes.
And those sequences are wonderful. Like those are such great sequences, and that's where
my favorite parts of the movie are in the first half because of those sequences. I love them so much.
Yeah, and that's where the movie's storytelling really shines too. Is like getting kind of the conflict between mostly James and Sanborn as they kind of disagree on the approach to things, as they get used to each other and working together. The storytelling is really told though through these sequences. The first one, where the movie opens, it's just kind of like the movie almost just kind of has a cold open. There's no credits at all.
Yeah, it's setting the tone.
Yeah, it just has the one title font or the one title thing for like the quote that they use at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it goes right into it. And I mean, that's a great sequence already. And that's the one that leads to Guy Pearce's character dying. And then they get Jeremy Renner as his replacement, as their kind of commander for this.
But everything spawns.
Unit.
Yeah, everything spawns from that opening scene. Sanborn is much more by the book after that happening. But also, obviously, William James coming into the picture, but also Eldridge feeling responsible for Thompson's death. So everything spawns from that first scene.
Yeah, you get a lot of Eldridge's kind of, you know, in immediate just like PTSD to like feeling like he could have saved him, but
here's Thompson,
you know,
he's dead, click, he's alive. He's dead, click, he's alive. That kind of thing.
Yeah. It's great. That's where it's like the characters are written very well as characters.
Yes.
And the exploration of their psychology, I think, is kind of the most interesting and engaging part of the journey of this movie, for sure. I do think that even the James character, like there are problems with him I get from like the military perspective, but I'm sure that there are also still people like him within that context too, to some extent. You know,
there are.
It's just they're just, you know, maybe not going to be as successful within the military as James is allowed to be because of going off book and everything. So
I wonder, this is a small tangent. I'm still staying on topic. I wonder if that might be a survivor bias. Do you know what that is?
Yes, vaguely, but explain it again.
I'll look it up to get the exact definition, but survivor bias, and it's basically, it might be called survivorship bias. Yeah, survivorship bias. So survivorship bias is like a selection bias. Oh, so the best analogy to give would be a plane as it's flying. So the hypothetical pattern of damage of surviving aircraft, and it's a gigantic cross plane of a plane that has many bullet holes on its wings, on its tail, and on its fuselage, but in the center of it, not the cockpit. And so the hypothetical pattern of damage of surviving aircraft shows locations where they sustain damage and still return home if the aircraft was reinforced in the most commonly hit areas, this would be a result of survivorship bias because crucial data from fatally damaged planes was being ignored. Those hit in the other places that did not survive. So I would say, yes, there are people like Jeremy Renner's character, but it's possible they put themselves in so many situations that they die that we don't talk about the people, or we only talk about the people that survive because they survive, kind of thing,
Right.
if that makes sense. So the
Yeah,
people
that
who
makes
are more
sense.
wild card, the people who are more prone to putting themselves in situations of danger, often don't return home. And those that do, we talk about them, but we talk about them as a minority. When maybe it's not the case, maybe it is, but we don't know because they didn't return home.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I just thought it was a
No,
small
no,
tangent of.
that's yeah. That's a interesting
Listen, I'm
aside.
using my philosophy minor for good,
Yeah,
for the
absolutely. Do
forces of good.
it. uh, there's th- there's a couple of times where you do get probably the most recognizable faces in the movie. One at the beginning, we mentioned
Guy
Guy
Pearce.
Pearce, and he dies. He dies fairly quickly because that's part of the opening sequence and the setup for the movie. And then later you get Ray Fiennes showing up, which not the first time he's worked with Catherine Bigelow. And when he showed up, though, I was like, "Oh, it's Ray Fiennes!" all of a sudden, and he dies just as
Yeah,
suddenly
he
as he
does.
shows up. And that kind of, I think that's a smart thing to do because I'm thinking about in something like 1917 where you have the most recognizable actors show up as like commanders and
Yeah,
stuff who
only in
like have
about
one
2 minutes
scene.
of the movie.
Right. Whereas in this, they kind of use it in an opposite way where you get the most recognizable actors to kind of like almost be able to surprise you by killing them off in the way
That's
that
true,
they
but
do.
they're at the most pivotal points in the movie.
They
Whereas
are.
whereas in 1917, it's very action oriented when it comes to the pivotal points. But in this movie, action is still the pivotal points, but it's based around the character or the actors that you recognize, kind of thing.
Right. Right.
By the
Right.
way,
Because there's like, I
I
think,
love the we have a flat. Well, can't you fix it? We don't have a tire. Or we have a tire, but we don't have a wrench. How do you waste a wrench? That guy threw it at that other guy. It's like you can use bullets, you know. We're in this part of the world you can use a bullet by
yeah,
Sanborn. I love the dialogue there.
I liked them ragging on each other. The
Yeah,
dialogue is really good in a lot of these situations. Like even in ways that are like ironically funny, but also kind of dark and kind of speak to some truth. Like I think that there's during one of the scenes where Renner's going to defuse a bomb and everything, and there's a guy in a car that comes up
yeah.
and he threatens the guy with a gun, tells him to go back, he shoots out his window, even puts the gun up to his head.
Which
And
fun
then
fact? That was the only real gun in the movie because they couldn't
huh.
find a 9 millimeter Beretta, but it was a broken gun, so no Alec Baldwin situation.
Ah, that's good.
That is good.
And
Yes,
obviously.
obviously.
uh but yeah, so but then when that guy finally does back off and then they like pin him on the ground, one guy puts his knee to the guy's throat. It's like he's like, well, if he wasn't an insurgent
He
before,
is
he is
now.
now.
It's like
He
very
says as
funny.
he's walking
Yeah.
towards this. Yeah, and it's like, yeah, probably
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
Like you get if he, yeah, like he may well have been within the context of the situation, but if he wasn't, then like
Especially
just
given his
gave him,
demeanor.
yeah,
But yeah.
because it was very strange for sure. Like with protocols and everything, I don't, with military stuff, yeah, it would be kind of an intense situation. That car comes flying down and then refuses to back up, but also like, yeah, if the person was totally innocent and fine, who knows? Maybe they had like a pregnant wife at home who's giving birth or something. That was the fastest route. I don't know.
Man, all he was
I just
doing
always
is
think.
driving down the street. Now he's got a pregnant
I just
wife? Oh
yeah.
no.
I just always think about that stuff. Like if somebody's flying down the road like that, and in this situation, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I don't know this guy's life, but yeah,
No,
it's
he's got a
kind of
pregnant
it is a
wife.
poignant. It is a darkly funny yet also very poignant line, I
Yeah.
think, for like the state of things. Yeah, because they're always dealing with like these IEDs, improvised explosive device. I looked that up. You like that? And
Brownie points for
but you get
Micaiah.
but you get different situations though where like you have the car bomb scene where like it's like the burnt out husk of a car, and he finds the switch, and everything in there, and he's going through the
I
car.
love the tension of the windshield wipers come on and it's like a oh,
Right.
and then he's like,
Yeah.
that's strange, and then he goes into the hood. Eldridge says, or Sanborn says, what's he doing now? And Eldridge is like, I don't know, he's popping the hood, probably checking the oil. And
Right.
and all he does is just unplug the windshield wipers, and he's like, all right, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Then he finds the switch, and then
Then
he
he
keeps it as like a memento.
Yeah, he finds the ignition switch. He calls it a dead man switch. A dead man switch is typically when, I don't know the exact thing for it, but a dead man switch is essentially when a person dies, that bomb will go off because when they're a dead man. But typically there are multiple detonators that you will see on bombs like that, and just like they call him the man in the suit, the man with the bomb strapped to his chest.
Yeah.
What they would refer to that as is a proxy bomb. So it's a bomb that's given to somebody else with the intent of them blowing it up, or the handler, they call them, the handler blowing them up if they get cold feet, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
There are multiple, and the multiple bombs that James pulls up via thread in a very cool shot, I will grant that. The detonator for that is a 9-volt battery with the positive and negative charge on the same, or positive and negative on the same side, being touched against 2 wires. That's what blows it up. So it's crazy the variety of bombs and detonators that you can find in that region. That's terrifying to
Right.
me. And that was
Yeah, and
terrifying
I
for me
think that
as a youngin.
yeah, I think that's also really an interesting kind of into like how specifically modern warfare
Yeah.
and modern war movies depict wars. It's very different than like older things. It's like, obviously in like World War One, you have like trench warfare, and different wars have different kind of defining qualities, and I feel like one of the more defining qualities here is these improvised explosives. So I understand why they would like choose to focus on that with a movie like this.
Yeah, specifically that's for an insurgency for typically a poorer country. So
Yeah.
you'll find much more, and you can see this. This is going to be topical, but man, in years this is going to be gone by the wayside, or probably not even. But the Ukraine war, they were strapping like RPG rockets to like rifles to propel them because they didn't have the rocket or propelled grenade launcher itself. So
Oh,
in that kind of thing, the when you don't have the money to find official weapons that you can use, you make do with what you have. So it was that kind of thing back
right.
in those days.
Yeah, it feels, yeah, it's that, and that's part of what adds to the
And that's
suspense of
genuine.
everything
Yeah.
too. Is that it's like every bomb that they encounter is like a different puzzle. So it could get old, like having sequence after sequence of like bomb diffusings, but it doesn't, because each one is so different. And just like there's the horrible one later in the movie when it's inside the body of a
Oh,
kid,
Beckham. Yeah.
or you think it's Beckham, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not Beckham, but yeah, but Jeremy
Yeah,
Renner's
because there's
character thinks
Beckham.
it's Beckham.
Beckham's this little kid that hangs out, and he sells DVDs.
He
around
sells
the base.
DVDs to the soldiers.
Bootlegs and stuff.
He sells Atlantic Rim to.
Yeah, he sells that.
That's not going to make
They're
sense to
looking for
people, but
Pacific
Atlantic Rim is a bootleg version of Pacific Rim.
Yeah, the straight to DVD ripoff. Or if we're talking about the one that you brought up to me earlier, from the Nazi overlords that came out the same year as Overlord, with a similar plot.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but it's more so like these bootlegs are more like a camera pointed at a screen, which is why he complains that it was shaky.
Yeah.
Because it's literally somebody just recording it on a camera. So, but yeah, this kid who he plays soccer with briefly, and like, I don't know, it's just a kid though, and there's some amount of innocence, even though the kid's like in this, country that's torn up by war and everything. But he's just trying to make a little money on the side, probably for his family. But then when he finds this kid that looks a lot like this kid Beckham, and it's a bomb inside of him, then you get the weirdest part of the movie is the scene after that where he leaves and like goes and tries to track down and find out what happened.
Yeah.
Definitely the strangest part of the movie.
It's character driven rather than like
Right.
what makes sense for the plot or what makes sense in real life
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Because yeah, but he's like all messed up about this kid and
Yeah.
everything, and then he finds out later the kid's back. So he's like, oh well, it wasn't him, and that kind of shakes him up in a different way again. So
I took it as he's kind of inherited responsibility for the kid because he doesn't think about his wife or child them, or he thinks about them but he doesn't really do anything about
mm,
them. Like he
yeah,
calls them but then hangs up. So you get the sense that he's kind of separated from them mentally. But
yeah,
yeah, and so he's taken what he believes is ownership of Beckham. So
yeah,
it's kind of that suppression of what you really feel about your family.
yeah. There's so Catherine Bigelow, who we haven't talked a lot about so far. We've brought her up a number of times,
Yeah.
but specifically, she is an action filmmaker, and it's kind of an interesting thing because one of the main things in her movies is this idea of masculinity. That's one of the biggest themes that I've seen in her films. And specifically, other films she's directed are like Point Break, um, and one of my
Wait, the
favorite.
new
I
one?
think my very favorite. No,
Oh,
the
okay, I was
original
about to
Point
say
Break with Keanu
with
and
Keanu and
Patrick
Patrick
Swayze.
Swayze. Okay,
Uh huh. So basically, you can credit her for the entire Fast and Furious franchise.
fair enough. No. I credit Vin Diesel for that. I assume the franchise was made the second he was born.
Have you seen Point Break?
I have not.
Have you seen the original Fast and Furious?
I have not.
It's a complete ripoff of Point Break. Like completely. It just stops at like the halfway point of Point Break, whereas Point Break actually continues and has like resolution. Fast and Furious just doesn't, and
Maybe
then
that's why they have
spawns the
10 of them.
franchise. Right,
It's because
exactly. Though they got to keep
they
going.
never learned to stop it.
Right. So,
Wait,
but
10
yeah,
and a
that's. I mean,
spinoff. Sorry.
yeah, there's always big machismo, and then like her movie Strange Days is probably my absolute favorite of hers for sure, and she's one of the best action directors out there. She just
I don't
is.
think I've seen another
Um,
movie from her.
Yeah, not all of her movies are
Oh,
like
Zero Dark 30,
absolute
duh.
winners. Yeah, Zero Dark 30, which came out after
Yeah.
this. This movie kind of shifted her focus, I think, to more grounded, realistic
Well,
stories.
that had to have been Mark Ball. I think I don't
Yeah,
suspect that she would have made Zero Dark 30 if he didn't write that one as well.
no, she made stuff like K-19, Us, which is a military movie of sorts. But yeah, nothing quite like this until this. But yeah, and I think that her exploration of masculinity within this movie is super fascinating as well, with both the Renner character and his own like detachment from his family. His wife, who's no longer his wife but still kind of his wife, and he's very defensive of her if anybody tries to say anything, even though technically they're divorced. um and you get the Anthony Mackie character too, who's like, I don't want to, he's like, I'm not ready to have a kid, and the one person I'm interested in always wants to talk about kids. But it's just like this deep repression. Like there's a lot of repression in this movie, and kind of the facade of masculinity and machismo. And it's interesting to get that from somebody like Bigelow. And I think that there's, some female directors are better at telling masculine stories, and some male directors are better at telling
I
feminine
wouldn't do a
stories.
blanket statement like that, but
Some
sure.
like just like sometimes I think that sometimes films tend to skew towards male perspectives over history, just because history skews towards male perspectives, and the types of people who end up being able to make films and stuff, it's biased. It always has been. Catherine Bigelow is the first female director to ever win Best Director at the Academy Awards, and was only the fourth ever to be nominated. Since then, there have been a couple more winners, with Chloe Zhao for Nomadland and Jane Campion for Power of the Dog, just within the last few years, as well as Emerald Fennell and Greta Gerwig getting nominations in the last few years as well. But it's just like a historically, like, it's interesting to me that the first movie directed by a woman is so masculine in its presentation as a military movie. But once again, it's par for the course for Bigelow's filmography. But you get somebody like Alfonso Cuarón, who has like motherhood as like a theme in so many of his films. And so I like seeing these themes as they translate and evolve over time from these filmmakers. And yeah, Bigelow brings her like great action sensibilities to this war drama, and that's part of what makes these sequences so tense and so great, is just her very good and solid understanding of that, plus the masculinity angle within the soldiers and the characters is something that really draws me into what this movie's going for with the psychology of it.
I don't really have anything to add to that. So,
All right. Well, I mean, do you have any other primary thoughts on the movie overall?
let's see. Do you want to go over what Drew says about it?
Yeah, we can go over what Drew says.
If you've got it on hand,
Yeah, so Drew says he wanted to call out the Tabasco.
yeah. So, and I can explain that more thoroughly. So, in an MRE, a meal ready to eat, which is the rations that are given to soldiers, there are specific things like I can recall stories of like M&Ms, because M&Ms, it takes a while for them to expire. Soldiers will just hold on to them for special occasions. Tabasco specifically, because it's a flavor, they'll hold on to it specifically, and it's behind his name patch, and that's kind of a cool little detail.
Yeah. Let's see. He also pointed out that if he wasn't an insurgent, he sure as hell is now. Line
as like a specific
mentions,
a special concern when it comes to like stabilizing and destabilizing the region at the time. More so than like a comedy line. It's more so a poke or a nod to what was going on at the time.
Yeah. He mentions a couple of scenes that he likes. He likes the artillery, the image of William James surrounded by the artillery. I can't say artillery
rounds. There you go. You just said it.
I assume he's talking about like what ends up being the poster for this movie.
Yeah, so him pulling up the bombs like all at once, like to unearth every single one of the bombs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great image for sure. Definitely a reason they used it.
It's like a tonal climax to the scene. Like he thinks he's defused the thing that is going to kill him, but then he sees another wire, and that wire leads to another wire, and that wire he pulls up, and he sees everything that can kill him around him.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll bring up this one. So this one is the insurgent that plants all of those bombs in the trunk of the car gets shot by a through and through, which means it didn't hit anything vital. It didn't hit like bone and then fragment off to hit anything vital. So he's losing blood, but if we apply pressure and then if we continue like giving aid to this man, he will eventually live. And Colonel Reed, I think is his name, the colonel says he's not going to make it, and he says no, but 15 minutes from now we could have like an ambulance and that kind of thing. And he says he's not going to make it, and so it pulls away. Drew's problem with that is once he says he's not going to make it, that's already him stating, yeah, we're just going to let him die. You don't have to like put the gunshot of somebody like actively killing him into the scene.
Right.
You can leave it more open-ended than that. And I think too, so I'll bring up, do you know, you probably don't know the story. It's in the early to late mid 90s. It was definitely in the 90s. There was the North Los Angeles shootout, like bank shootout. Do you know about that?
No.
So it was two bank robbers who had done several jobs in the past. They were armed to the teeth. They had body armor everywhere. They had multiple fully automatic rifles. They had a shotgun. They had multiple pistols. They had thousands of rounds of ammunition on them. It was a bank robbery gone bad. Immediately when they went into the bank, a police officer sees them, notifies backup, and basically gets the bank surrounded almost instantaneously. When they come out, they start firing. They fire thousands of rounds at police officers, wounding, I think, a dozen, killing none of them somehow. thankfully. But so thousands of rounds are spewing, and they are getting hit multiple times within minutes. So they are getting hit so many times. Eventually, one of them is shot dead. I think 20 minutes into it. About 40 minutes into it, the other one is incapacitated, but asking for help. And the police are not giving it to him because he just tried to kill their brethren. So, and a doctor tries to go onto the scene to help him, the assailant, and he's barred from doing that from police officers under the, obviously they don't know all the facts, they don't know how many shooters there are, that kind of thing. There were only two, but at the time obviously they wouldn't know how many there are, or maybe it's the guise of, you're not allowed to help this man, this is an active crime scene, but you're not allowed to help this man because he just tried to kill us. So he bled out on the street that day instead of, receiving help. So it's kind of that thing.
Yeah, no, that's
it's
interesting.
it's just kind of
Um,
one of those things where if somebody's trying to kill you, um obviously you don't want to help them even though you can,
right.
and you
Yeah, and
probably
it's
should.
yeah, not great because like do no harm, is yeah, it's making a doctor not be able to
Oh yeah.
treat somebody is
Yeah.
a big no,
It's yeah,
no
it's
for
it's
sure.
also it's also one of those things of, are you really better than the person that you're trying to fight if you won't at least do something a little bit better than them, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's just one of those
yeah,
things.
yeah. Then the next thing Drew comments on is the conversation where so James goes down to get his gloves when they were setting off
Which
charges,
those things
and
are a dime a dozen. You're issued multiple pairs of those in the military. So I think
right,
I think he just had the death wish, and I think he just thought it was cool for him to, like, right
right, like
before
that's
the
a little
second
odd.
detonation to just go down and get your gloves after they might have
I
been
thought that,
fried from the first
yeah,
detonation.
yeah. I was like, that's a little
Yeah,
odd, but okay. But either way, the point of it, I guess, is to be to have that conversation where um Mackey's character
picks up
talking
the
to
detonator,
Eldridge,
and
then he picks up
and
the
he's like, it's
detonator. He's
amazing.
like,
He just died. There, we'd have to do some paperwork, obviously,
yeah,
but like, and Eldridge says, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he says, "No, are you sure about killing him?" That kind of thing.
yeah. Which Drew brings up that the conversation is reminiscent of fragging in Vietnam, with similar situation where soldiers under a leader were not confident in their ability to keep the group safe and would ensure accidents in quotes happened so they would be taken away and another hopefully safer person would replace them.
Yeah. So compared to the Iraq War and Afghanistan, Vietnam was the Wild West when it came to soldiers' freedom to do whatever they want. Obviously, that kind of spilled over. There were incidents. Abu Ghraib prison in the Middle East is one I would point to. The atrocities that happened there at the hands of U.S. soldiers, but I don't think it happened nearly on the scale that occurred even like World War II or Vietnam or Korea would be ones that I point to. And it was mostly because of a lack of, like, I'll call it paperwork, but a lack of accountability is what I'll say.
Yeah, yeah. Then he brings up Iraq Most Wanted playing cards. I don't know what that is.
So that's an interesting one. So the deck of cards was created by the U.S., I think, an intelligence agency, specifically so that soldiers who were playing cards, like just on a table, would see the faces of the important members of Saddam Hussein's government and the party and the Revolutionary Party, so that they would get an understanding of, if you see this person, that's one of the deck of cards, which is a fascinating thought experiment
Huh?
if you think about
That
it,
is.
because, and obviously Saddam Hussein was the ace of spades, so it kind of like goes down from there. Like, I think the aces were like his sons as well. So that's an interesting little like memento, or like interesting little like fact in history to note, is there were, it's like a mind game for soldiers. And that's kind of the, so I can't remember the exact cards, but I think it was like the Jack of Clubs that Ray Fiennes's group captured, and so they were talking about like how much they were worth and that kind of thing, and that was real. So contractors and mercenaries were hunting down the cards. So
Yeah.
it's just an interesting tidbit in history. I like that. I like bringing it up, but I find it fascinating, just that entire subject.
Yeah, no, I love it when filmmakers include details like that are
Yeah,
completely inconsequential to the movie, but just
like
having
little
it in
nods to
there.
people who know.
Yeah, this movie, okay, the whole film feels very
Yeah,
authentic. I cannot speak to the authenticity of it because I don't know what it's pulling from enough. But in terms of its presentation, everything feels very authentic, which makes it when it doesn't feel authentic a little bit
yeah.
jarring at times. I think that's kind of where that comes into play a little bit too, because there's so much attention to detail with stuff like that that sometimes, yeah, it gets a little, when it gets a little off, you feel it more.
So Drew brings up the he questions that they're SAS. I think they're more subcontractors, but they could be SAS because they're all British. But oh, the SAS is basically the British Armed Forces Special Forces. So think of them as Navy SEALs,
Yeah.
but for the British. So the I'm gonna say Ray Fiennes' group. I'm just gonna call them that because that's all I know of them as. So
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes'
Mm-hmm.
group has a Barrett 50 cal, which is a specific type of sniper rifle for a specific type of purpose, and they have ammo for it, but somehow Eldridge is the one to get it, and somehow Sanborn and James are the ones to operate it. The thing I'll say about this, again, not in the military, but what I do know is there is a specific sniper school where you train for weeks to specifically be able to snipe at range. Otherwise, you are basically useless. It's a bit like airplane. Like, imagine the pilots
Right.
of imagine the pilots of an airplane being incapacitated and therefore you have to land the plane. It's actually easier to do that than to snipe at range because of the fact that there's an
Oh yeah.
autopilot. But also,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
if I went to try to pick up a golf club and go on
yeah,
a professional course, not knowing how to play golf,
it's a
I
bit
would
like that.
get nowhere near anywhere what I'm trying to hit, you know? And so I imagine it's similar with sniping, from a
My
distance.
thing is they get some of the dialogue correct, which is weird to me. I think they might have had a military consultant on set who like told them this is kind of what they'd say, this is kind of what they do if they were sniping.
Mm.
Obviously, there is a sniper and there is a spotter, and there's dialogue between the both of them. Not probably not that much, but um, something else I'll note is when Ray Fiennes dies, I have absolutely no idea why the other members of the group didn't pick up the sniper rifle because obviously if they have a 50 cal they're going to be either trained with it or more trained with it than EOD techs. So
Right.
that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise it's a great sequence once again.
Love it.
Like the actual scene itself is great, and like the suspense of
Yep.
just waiting almost is kind of
Waiting because if you leave cover there's going to be a sniper that picks you off or there's going to be
right.
something, and so you're waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically they were probably waiting for hours, but they didn't have to wait for hours because it's the desert. Every
Yeah, and
minute's going to feel like an eternity there.
the drink of Capri Sun, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, no, that scene is it's another great sequence in the movie, even
It's one
though,
of my
like you said,
favorite.
there's some logic flaws. Yeah. But yeah, and so yeah, Drew mentions he says he really does like this movie and feels like it's a great addition to all of the military movies made during the War on Terror.
The
I
yeah
cannot
the
speak.
yeah the
Great
wars on
Great War on Terror?
the greater
Is that
wars
what
on
it's called?
terror. So Iraq.
Greater Wars on
I assume
Terror.
that's what he meant there. He can let us know in the
Yeah.
comment section. Come on, Drew.
Yeah. He
Feed
said,
us to
I
the
appreciate
algorithm.
that.
Give us some feedback.
Yes. Comment, Drew. Comment. Uh, he said, I appreciate that it's not just rah, 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 America great, and is
Yep, he
willing
used
to let
that
its
verbatim.
characters show actual flaws and show a real range of emotions. Really kind of wish they didn't have the last scene of him going to new deployment, but also I can see the character doing that since he's looking for the thrill of defusing bombs. So yeah, the thrill-seeking element of that. The addiction element is something that Bigelow does a few times in some of her movies. I mentioned Strange Days before, where the drug in there is real human experience, and I think that this movie kind of follows with that to some extent.
The thing I'll say for that is, yeah, it makes sense for his character to not feel not feel the way he feels, or he's basically like in Shawshank Redemption, he's been institutionalized. So he once he gets back to the air quotes real world of everyday life, he just doesn't feel like he belongs there. So he just can't
Yeah,
wait to go back into the field.
right.
So I yeah, character wise I'm okay with that, but it's kind of just fulfilling the character, and that's about it.
Yeah, I do appreciate though, like Drew says though, that this movie's not hero worship for
No.
sure. It shows that I think that there are heroic acts and heroic people within war and within the military, but war itself is in no way
Yeah.
heroic. And I think that this movie kind of gets that pretty well. Um, and so yeah, I think that yeah, we can get into scoring now. I think if you're ready for that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we've been going for like an hour, so may as well.
Oh yeah, it has been an hour.
Okay.
So scoring in this podcast, it's very casual. All the categories are very vague. We go from 0 to 2, 0 being poor, 1 being good, 2 being great. We do that um in a way to force ourselves to come to a conclusion that can't be vague, or that can be vague rather. So, let's
Yeah.
start with writing.
Writing.
So if you want to do this, we can debate amongst ourselves, and then I can bring up Drew's score in this.
Yeah, yeah. Here, we'll do it each category. So we'll debate amongst ourselves, and you throw in Drew's number for it too.
Yeah.
Um, so with writing, okay, so I've gotten in the habit of just writing out my scores for every category before the movie. However, with this one, I left writing blank because I wasn't quite sure how to approach it. But so I was wondering more what you were thinking about that.
So yeah, most of the military nitpicks that I find, I don't think concern the writing. I think it concerns the impact of the realism, kind of, and how
Yeah,
everyone thinks this is one of the most realistic things in war movies, but I don't think it is. I don't think it's the worst. I don't think it's near the worst. I don't think it's the best. It might be kind of middle of the pack when it comes to realism in war movies.
yeah.
So
I mean, this won a writing Oscar for best original
it did, and
screenplay.
I have to take that into account because there are some scenes that are rough at best, I would say.
Yeah,
Closer to the end, definitely. But
I don't know if I would quite give it the Oscar over some other things, but I don't know everything that went into the actual writing of it, like how much was written in the sequences themselves and all of that. Because there are some great original screenplays that year. We mentioned Inglorious
yeah,
Bastards. I think Up was nominated for original screenplay too.
was it really?
Um, it might have been. I don't
Oh,
remember for
let
sure.
me. I've got the yeah, best original screen.
I
It
took
up, yep. A Serious Man, which you haven't seen.
yeah. No,
You
I
have
have.
seen.
I
I
have seen
haven't
A
seen.
Serious Man. I
Um,
love A Serious Man. Yeah.
so
Among the ones that were nominated, of those four that we've mentioned, it's last place for me, even though I still
I
think
would
it's
say
overall well written.
I would say I haven't seen A Serious Man or The Messenger, but I would still say that Inglorious Bastards probably deserves it over this when it comes to screenplay. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
I think
It's
Inglorious
just a
Bastards
matter.
has one of the best written screenplays that I've
Yeah.
seen. But I wouldn't say Up is better. And if you say, would you say A Serious Man is better than The Hurt Locker when it comes to
Yes,
screenplay?
but also I've a bias because the Coen brothers are my favorite
Oh sure.
filmmakers and I just vibe with their writing. So I would say that. So it's really just a matter of I don't think it's the best in that
No.
group as far as writing goes, but it's a very distinct writing style that
Yeah.
focuses on realism and also gives, the acting the characters, a good follow through. The question is this a one? Like, do we think that this is just good, or do we think that this is great? Like, it's deserving of its nomination.
So even a good screenplay for us, I think could be worthy of a nomination, maybe not
True.
worthy of a win.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning more towards a one because of all the faults that I can name
Yeah.
compared to the movies that we've given twos in the past, I
I'm
I
with it.
do
Yeah.
really love some of the dialogue and some of the scenes in this movie, but I
Yeah.
can't really say that writing in and of itself is its best foot forward.
I think the specificities are where the screenplay is the
Yeah.
strongest. I think the broad strokes it kind of misses in a few
Yeah, the
spots.
themes it doesn't it plays on some themes, doesn't really flesh out
Yeah.
much of it, or it doesn't
Yeah.
flesh it out to
And
its entirety, to its natural conclusion, I would say,
yeah.
with Eldridge, with
And
Jeremy Renner's character.
yeah. And this is a very director heavy
It
movie.
is.
Like, so the screenplay does kind of take a back seat because I don't know how much of those sequences are written out, to
Yeah.
compared to what's
I would have to go
created
through the
in
script, but yeah, I
storyboards and
don't really
everything.
want to because what I know of Mark
Yeah.
Ball's movies, I don't really like the way that he writes. I hate it when journalists write movies because it's all so weird. Ugh.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a blanket statement. Journalists can write great movies. I'm immediately retracting my statement. I'm recanting. So yeah, so
What did Drew say?
Drew called it a two. Let me tell you exactly what he said about it. I'm just gonna do verbatim what he said. He said, "I really did enjoy the writing and the flow of everything. Some stuff didn't work, didn't make a lot of sense. Running off base to try and dish out vigilante justice seemed a bit out of character and definitely out of place. Especially the throwaway lines for why he doesn't get crucified by leaving the base by himself. Overall, still some great writing.
Yeah. A strong one is what I'll say this
Yeah, a
is.
strong one, not quite a two, is what I'd call it.
Yeah.
I think that's
For
fair.
the sake of what, yeah. Yeah.
And also, we
All
don't have to
right.
listen to
Second
Drew.
category. We don't have to listen to Drew at all.
We are choosing to give him a
Uh,
platform. Do not bite the hand that
He did
feeds
not.
you, Drew.
Okay, let's see. World building is our next category,
Yep.
as usual. And I think that one of the things that this movie does so well is create an incredibly convincing environment. They filmed it in Jordan, which neighbors Iraq.
Right.
Apparently, it was so safe though they didn't need any security.
So an interesting fact,
so-
I don't think I brought it up, but so they chose Jordan, yes, because basically everywhere in the region is unsafe for American filmmakers, but also they were one of the few filmmakers to actually make it to Jordan because big studios would never go to Jordan because of how unsafe
oh
it
yeah.
is. So
Hmm.
I'll list the smoke bomb that Jeremy Renner throws on the ground at the first scene. Did I tell you? Did I say this already?
No, you
Okay.
didn't.
So the smoke bomb that Jeremy Renner throws at his feet and pisses off Sanborn, that is an actual smoke bomb from the Jordanian army,
Oh
which is
really?
crazy because they warned him, or they warned the filmmakers that he could get burned on the pin. And Jeremy Renner was just like, "Nah, I can do it." And so everyone was just like, "Yeah, all right, let's let him do it." But he absolutely had no idea how to work one of those things. so
Oh
so
yeah.
he was just kind of like playing it off as something that he could do, but he couldn't do. I think it's just
Yeah.
interesting that everything surrounding like the world building. Yeah. No, continue with your point if I cut you off.
Yeah, no, no, no. I think that they really did a great job at creating the environment that this exists in, making it feel like, almost footage that you would have seen on TV, brought to even greater reality because you are closer to it.
Mm-hmm.
With like the movie makes you feel closer to it, and I think it's really backed up by the filmmaking too. But yeah, just everything to do with the sets and the filmmaking to convey this reality, that's where the movie feels so authentic. And I think that that's just a really talented group of people. I would give world building a two.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that, I do think it feels very real, but I think for me, I have to put some of the blame on the falter the faulting of the realism doesn't work. I guess I have to put
Mm,
that on the world building. And
yeah,
because I can't really put it on anything else that I see here.
I see what you're saying.
So I think
Because if like the structural
mhm,
stuff that doesn't make sense, maybe that does fall into the world building.
yeah, because yeah, and also how obviously the characters and that kind of thing, but the way that military characters play with the military, like conform to the military, the way it's done here, I think is not great. So, and I think I want to put that on the world building rather than characters, because obviously this is
Okay.
a character driven story. So
Yeah.
the world building in and of itself kind of has that issue. So
Yeah.
I'll say what Drew thinks
Another.
for
Yeah.
this
Sure.
one. He says, "I feel like a lot of the world building was already done by just having it set in early 2000s Iraq. Overall, it's just a small slice of the pie, but does a decent job at building the team."
Okay. Yeah, I think it's another strong one. Then you've convinced me that it's not quite a two because of some of those flaws in some of the
Yeah,
areas.
I'd say if it went for realism while keeping the greatness of the world, the feel of the world building it had, I'd say that would be a two.
Yeah.
Because if the selling point of this movie is it's realistic and it's not very realistic, I think that's a flaw
Yeah. I see
that
what
we
you're
can
saying.
attribute to it.
Yeah. All right. Characters is the next category.
Characters is the next category, which I think when it comes to the writing aspects of this movie, I think the characters is the strongest.
Yes. I think that you really just have your three main characters and then some supporting other characters. But those three main characters are really well fleshed out for what they're going for in the movie. And it gives you the time with those characters for sure. And like I do like the intermittent camaraderie slash conflict in between the battles that they get to kind of flesh them out even more. And that progression as the movie goes on, I think is really good.
Yeah. They're becoming a team over the course of the movie, and then it immediately breaks up.
Yeah.
Very
So characters.
suddenly. Well,
Yeah.
kind of suddenly. All due to Jeremy Renner.
Yeah. Right. Right. So yeah, characters a two then.
Yes. Well, for me,
For
I'll
me as well.
Drew says, I feel like they don't really flesh them out a lot for a movie mainly about three people where everyone else is basically a throwaway character. You don't get to learn much about them. It still is enough to understand kind of who they are and how they ought to act, but nothing amazing. I would kind of agree with that, but only because I think that the arcs aren't fully fleshed out.
Right. I actually originally wrote down one for characters, but through talking about the movie, I kind of bumped it up a little
Yeah,
bit.
because yeah, as I said before, I think with the writing aspect of it, I think the reason that we love the writing so much is because of the characters, not necessarily because of the plot or because of the world building
Right.
in and of itself.
I think I agree. Yeah, because like I said, the stories within those sequences, and the
It's
story
all
really
character
is
driven.
those
Yep,
characters. Yeah, it's all
and all
character
the
driven.
action, it's character
Um,
driven. So
yep, yeah. Directing is an easy two
directing
for
is a
me.
very easy two.
Very easy to. Catherine Bigelow is one of the best action directors of all time, and here is like the height of all of her abilities that she's learned over her career, focused in on these extremely intense sequences, and it's extraordinary. Like the film, like the filmmaking, the directing in this is extraordinary.
So yeah, the things I'll add to that is $15 million budget, and it made it look like well over $100 million budget,
Oh
which is insane
yeah,
to me. Might have been actually a benefit because it was in Jordan. Obviously, everything's going to be less expensive there.
right,
You have to ship everything, of course. That's probably where most of the and they had to ship all of the
yeah,
guns there. Obviously, the
yeah,
vehicles and stuff they were already there, but all of the props had to be shipped there. So, and that's got to be some crazy pricing, especially given the circumstances at the time. But
yeah,
yeah, making it look like that is kind of insane, kind of insane.
yeah, for sure.
Also, I always point to some of the actors' performances being at the feet of the directors, or maybe it's like the stage
Yes,
direction or the screen direction. Be
the director's first job usually is to get good performances out of your
right.
actors, get the performances that you want to get out of your actors. So sometimes performances, yes, the actors are responsible for their own performances, but the directors are the ones who are in charge of getting what the performance they want out of the actors. So she clearly does a great job with that.
So when I told Drew, oh, easy to, when I told Drew what to consider when talking about directing, I said good performances across the board plus good choices overall for filmmaking. So obviously the buck stops there with the director. So he said,
She actually got final cut on this too, which is rare.
"How
So
so? I th-
what do
I
you
thought
mean?
directors usually get final cut.
No, usually the studio has final cut.
Well, it's an independent studio, no?
Right, but like I don't know the specifics here, but it's not the directors have to have some sort of sway or clout to be able to get Final Cut on their
I wonder.
films because that's not always the
I wonder who
case.
had Final Cut on Overlord, since it's Bad Robot, so it's J.J. Abrams' movie first and foremost. But Julius Avery was the director. I wonder. I'd
Yeah,
have to. I'd
I
have
don't
to
know
look
who
that
had
up.
Final Cut on that.
I'd have to
Yeah,
look it up.
that would be an interesting thing to know.
But yeah, I see what you're saying. But I think that's more so for big studios now, who gets Final Cut, whether the studio gets Final Cut or not.
It really kind of depends.
Oh sure.
That's it's a murky area on who gets that, but usually the director doesn't get that unless they have specific sway or
Yeah,
clout.
for context, actors can also get Final Cut,
Yeah,
which is crazy because for the love of the game, Sam Raimi lost Final Cut to Kevin Costner.
that makes sense for that
Yes, it
movie.
does. Doesn't it explain quite a bit?
It does. It does. Having watched that movie now this year, I was like, oh, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Um uh Circling back, Drew says, love the directing and the direction the movie went. Not much to say I haven't already said for visuals and wiring. I feel like the direction really helped draw all these in uh, uh together effectively.
Yeah,
I would agree.
yeah, for sure.
He gave it a
Yep,
2.
yep. We already talked about the acting quite a
Yeah.
bit, and I think that we've kind of established that we think it's a 2 here.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think
I think
I don't
it's
think there's
yeah,
very many like scenes that I wouldn't say aren't well acted, especially given that
right.
these aren't at the time these weren't staples of like acting. Like Jeremy Renner was pretty unknown, Anthony Mackie fairly
Yeah,
unknown, and the guy who plays
yeah,
Eldridge, his first name is Brian, I think.
yeah. Brian Garrity.
Garriger?
I know the last name's
Oh,
Garrity.
Garrity, you're right.
I don't know the first name,
Yeah,
but
Brian Garrity.
um, Brian Garrity. Okay. Glad we got that
Ray
settled.
Fiennes does phenomenal as always in the 5 minutes that he is in the movie.
Yeah,
Guy
same
Pearce
with
does really well. Yeah,
yeah, Guy Pearce as well.
yeah, I would say it's a
Yeah,
2.
yeah, I think it's a 2. Once again, it's not like Renner got an Academy Award nomination, and he's really given the most with performance
Yeah,
wise, in the movie for sure. There's a reason nobody else got nominated here, but it's not because they're bad. It's just it has a little bit of that military ensemble feel, but sometimes that can be not the best as far as acting goes. But here, it's all really strong.
which I think I'll note. Real life doesn't always make sense when it comes to what people say. So if yeah,
Right.
I think oddly enough, now that I'm thinking about it, what the characters say and how the characters feel, probably a little bit realistic, but doesn't. Looking back on it, probably isn't realistic. So, but
Mm,
I don't think that's a good or bad thing when it comes to filmmaking because real life doesn't often make sense. So, filmmaking,
yeah.
writing doesn't always have to make sense. It's better, I think, generally for filmmaking to make sense or for writing to make sense for filmmaking to be better. So,
Right.
um, but yeah, I still think I still like the performances of the big three. Everyone who is supporting their characters may not be as fleshed out or as good, but the actors performing them is good. So,
Yeah. It's all very convincing for the setting and the environment for sure.
and Drew says pretty good. Every actor individually is great, but nothing super amazing. One.
Mm. I think the actors bring a lot of
That
nuance to
little
the characters.
oh,
So
Drew.
no,
How dare you?
I just think that the performances honestly might even be a little stronger than the characters on the page. I think that there's a lot to what's going on with them, and I think the performers bring a lot out of that. So
I think it's all relative when it comes to that. So it's
yeah,
like
true.
it depends on what Drew's seen, and it depends on what I've seen, and it depends on what you have
Yeah,
seen. What is considered great acting because acting for the most part is subjective. So
yeah, for sure. Um, let's see. Visuals is our next
yep,
category. This kind of really comes down to how you feel about the doc style because a lot of people don't really like
I
that
hate the
style.
shaky cam in this. I can like
You
shaky
do?
cam, but I do not. I dislike the shaky cam in this. Like I can point to the first scene with the robot is going down the path, and the shaky cam. Obviously, the robot is shaking as it's going across the rocks, but the camera is also shaking as if it's like attached to another robot filming it. That I do not like. If you're showing something that's shaky, do not shake the camera as if it were a part of it when it's focused on it, not a part of it, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I wrote down in my notes. I think that this is actually a really effective use of handheld
And I
cameras.
agree for the most part. I'm just pointing to the things that don't make sense to me when
Yeah.
it comes to shaky cam.
Yeah, it did get a cinematography nomination. I think it has, like I've already mentioned Barry Ackroyd. This is his style. So some people criticize it in Paul Greengrass movies too, like Captain Phillips, like United 93. Um, and it is present here though too. Yeah, it's definitely like the camera's always shifting and moving to some extent. But um I think that the visual style of this movie works extremely well for grounding it in the reality that they're building within the world. That might be why I was kind of leaning towards a 2 with world building, might be because I think the visual elements are so great.
So this is going to be this is going to be purely based on me. The reason I give it a 2 is because of the explosions. Quite frankly,
Honestly
quite
though, they're
quite
great.
quite frankly, that first explosion. So when a plastic explosive explodes, it creates a high pressure shockwave. What that shockwave does is when it impacts a closed container, it expands the container and pops it. So the reason that Guy Pearce's character died is because of that shockwave, not necessarily because of fragmentation from or shrapnel from the rocks
Right.
or the bomb itself. So I the way that I don't know the exact way that they did that to make it happen, but I suspect it was a high pressure burst of like air to shoot up all those rocks and make it seem like there was a shockwave, which is
Yeah.
so cool because it looks so good. So that and also the shot of before Jeremy Renner's character goes down to pick up his gloves, that shot of them detonating and you see the shockwave and everything like that. You see the cloud, and it's all like one nice, neat little composition of a shot. I like that. That's the kind of
Yeah.
stuff that I like. So,
Yeah.
but everything looks realistic for civilians, I would say. So
Yeah. They went out of their way to get that grounded look to it, and even with the explosions they intentionally stayed away from like gasoline style explosions because they didn't want the big red plume, because that's not realistic for how most explosions are, especially in war settings.
right.
So yeah, I think for me personally it's 2. So if that's how you get to a 2, then I accept.
No, I think most of the cinematography is well done. I just don't like those few shots of shaky cam that are just awkwardly shot like that.
Yeah.
I can't really point to anything else visually that's bad. So, yeah. Drew says lots of he says a paragraph on this. So, lots of striking visuals and scenes to draw emotions from the audience. I appreciate how we have a war movie about bombs that does not use a lot of gore and instead sticks to a tamer visual. Definitely some iconic scenes, especially the first bomb the new team disarms with him pulling the wires to reveal a circle of artillery rounds. Absolutely love the shooting style and the use of different shooting techniques to help draw the scene. A handheld shot when he is having the breakdown in the shower, or the shaky cam after the taxi drives through the perimeter to add tension to the scene. 2.
Yeah. All right. So we're all in agreement.
Yes.
Way to go, Drew. We can credit you with that.
Although again, we do not have to listen to Drew. It is clear. It is very much up to our discretion.
Way to go, Drew, having a correct opinion for once.
Something something broken clock, something something twice a day.
Editing. Actually, so we've brought up Raimi a lot on this show, but the editors are Bob Murawski and Chris Innes, who both started on working on the original Evil Dead and have both continued to work with Sam Raimi throughout his career. So it's actually interesting seeing that kind of.
We now have a repeat editors, don't we?
Editors, yeah, we have repeat editors
on the show.
I think one of them worked on Darkman at least.
Okay,
but
so we have repeat editor.
Yeah, because I think that Bob Murawski's done more than Chris Innes
Yeah.
overall. But yeah, they both worked on this and they both started at the same place. So it's kind of interesting to see that trajectory for him. This movie won an Oscar for Best
Hmm.
Editing. I think that it's a terrifically edited film, especially those sequences, for sure. I think that there's somewhere in the 2/3 of the way through the movie, kind of when he leaves and does the thing. I think that's more of a writing thing that kind of affects the pacing a little bit there,
Yeah.
because I think all of the rest of it is done impeccably, and I wouldn't chalk that up to an editing thing for the pacing being a little
No.
odd. So for me, it's a pretty easy two for editing.
So, yeah, I think the only movie that I would consider to have better film editing in this year would be Inglourious Bastards. But I can't really fault this movie for that. I mean, Inglourious Bastards is a great movie on its own. So,
Mm.
I yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I think the editing is very very well done when it comes to this movie.
Yep.
Pacing is good. Um the way the movie looks, well, like you spoke to color correction being a post-production kind of thing.
Color, yeah, color grading is part of editing
Yeah,
for sure.
and it's very brown.
Yeah, but they once again they capture it
Yeah.
well. Like the whole thing. Like there's a consistency
Yeah.
to it for sure.
I would say
Um,
it's a 2 based on what we've given 2s and based on what we've given 1s before.
yeah,
So,
war films, good war
yeah.
films tend to have very strong editing, both visually and our next category, sound.
Oh, well, wait, hold up.
Sound.
Hold up.
You can bring up
Okay.
Drew's thoughts.
He actually said not a really big buff into editing and post production, but overall I enjoyed it and a lot of it made sense. Don't feel like I could add enough to the conversation with this, so I'd concur with what y'all have to say. So that's him bowing down and letting us take the lead on this one. So
Yes, lick our boots. All right, sound. It won 2 Oscars for sound mixing and sound editing. War films tend to do that because, like I just said, they kind of have to. If the sound is wrong in a war movie, the whole movie feels
mhm.
off. It's a pretty easy two here.
Yeah, it definitely won the 2 Oscars that it needs to for sound, and I like the tense nature of the score
Yes, this
very
is
very
a
much.
repeat. This is a repeat composer again with Marco
Which that's
Beltrami.
not surprising because composers get around. So
Right.
they get around. Um, I would say agree. I don't think there's any qualms that I have that would lower this to a 1.
Yep, and it was nominated for original score
Yeah.
as well. And it's not just Marco Beltrami in this one. He also worked with Buck Sanders. Just figured I'd give credit there too. So now our genre category.
Whoa,
This
wait,
is
hold up.
definitive. Oh, I
Just
keep
because he
forgetting
bowed
about
down to
Drew.
us for 1 round doesn't mean he doesn't get a say.
Again.
So Drew said, really appreciated the lack of a score, and I'll kind of elaborate on that because he didn't in parts. There is definitely a score, but for war
Right.
movies, oftentimes the score will take a backseat to action and to the feel of the scene itself, rather than the score itself just blaring the whole time. He said, really appreciated the lack of a score and how there wasn't much music present in the movie. It made the times that music were used so much more impactful. Also, the use of sound or lack thereof to create tension in situations was done well. He gave it a 1.5, which I even told him we don't do partial value. So that's him. Yeah, he's never allowed back on. He broke the rules. But I
Yeah.
would say because a 1.5 doesn't equal a 2, what he says is a 1, but I still think we go 2.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, genre category. This is definitely a war movie. It's a pretty easy one. um, And how would you define this here for genre? Like in terms of not defining the genre because we know it's war, but like
So
how well?
if
What would you say?
it's interesting because I haven't seen many films on the Iraq or Afghanistan wars, but I have seen quite a few war movies. And I think this is pretty middle of the pack when it comes to execution of what war is. I don't think it plays it's definitely a different style of war movie, but I still think it's middle of the pack when it comes to the ones that I have seen. Like Lone, I keep talking about Lone Survivor uh, when I bring up Iraq or Afghanistan war movies, but I think it's because it does war pretty well in that movie
Mm-hmm.
compared to a Zero Dark 30 or this movie. And those are just the ones that I can name off the top of my head. I've definitely seen more movies like that, but I think it's just middle of the pack. I think a 1 is fair to give it.
Um, yeah, I don't really like Lone Survivor as a movie very
No,
much.
but I think the war in that movie is done well. I don't think the writing
Yeah,
is that great, but mostly because it's trying to be as realistic as possible. Like I said,
yeah,
realism isn't always like the best writing. Life is
right.
not
I
life
think
would not get an Academy Award nomination for
I
writing.
think taking into it, yeah, I think taking into account the criticisms against this movie in
Yeah.
particular, I'm with you on the one. I think its presentation is immaculate, but I think that its accuracy hurts it in terms of that, just because there was such a controversy around.
And that's why I
Look at
think I
me,
can't give it
Sean Connery,
that
controversy.
controversy. Yeah, no, I don't think I can give this a 0 because it's got insurmountable criticism from veterans and people who've seen combat, but I can't give it a 0 because of the fact that it portrays itself in a particular kind of way. So I think just good is fine for this
Yeah.
movie for war.
What does Drew say about it?
Drew says, I feel like this movie has a special impact for military movies, especially considering when it was released. Plus, it opens the opportunity to have conversations about lots of things that don't, uh, but doesn't address them directly. He gave it a 2.
I think that what Drew is saying there about genre applies more to impact, which
Mm-hmm.
I do think is a two.
Yep.
Um,
This is a
to
pretty
go to our
easy impact.
last,
Yeah.
I think that both okay, it won Best
Yep.
Picture, but we've had a Best Picture that we rated as a 1 before. But I think what pushes this over is one, I do think it had a major impact on the type of war movies that we would see coming later. Two, it's no small thing for it's the with Catherine Bigelow's historic Oscar win for that. It really kind of did break an industry standard up to that
Sure.
point, which you could say, oh man, there had been a few female directors nominated before, but the industry standard was that men are directors and not just directors. But this is a very masculine movie directed by a woman, and it kind of broke some standards in some interesting ways, I think. Um, and I think opened that door finally, um, at least in a public way. That so yeah, there's a lot of stuff with this movie, but it's definitely a
I
two.
would say it more so pulled off the band-aid. It
Yeah,
just finally did it.
yes, it got the band-aid and allowed that to move forward finally. So
Yeah.
um yeah, but yeah, there's so much you could talk about with impact with this movie that it's not really. I'm not gonna say it's even like it's not quite a 3 if we were to have a 3, kind of like we've said before, but it's a pretty easy 2.
A 3 would be like Jurassic Park.
Or
A
The
3 would be
Godfather, yeah,
The Godfather.
Citizen
Yeah.
Kane, Metropolis, yeah,
Citizen Kane, Metropolis. Yep.
Casablanca, yeah.
Birth of a Nation. Wait.
It would be, but unfortunately,
No, it would still just be a 2.
yeah,
I couldn't give it a 3 for impact.
yeah.
It had a negative impact, so well,
All right,
yeah.
so that puts us at 17.
Okay, here's what Drew said
All
about.
right, I've already.
Without a doubt, I believe that this movie had a large cultural impact and holds a special place in history too.
Yep, for sure. I think that, yeah, it's a pretty easy 2. Which
Yeah,
puts our final score at 17 out of 20, which it's nice to feel like something that we both are like really on board with. I think the last one.
especially after a few 11 out of 20s and
Yeah.
Friday the 13th getting a 3 out of 20. Yeah,
and Crash. I think the last one we were both like
and Crash.
really high on was Texas Chainsaw with 16 out of 20. So this
Yeah,
one being 17 out of 20, it's kind of refreshing to like watch something really great. Even though I will say, even among some of those other movies that we watched, this is not my favorite. And this is where the scoring is
no,
very subjective to our show and not the individuals, because there are movies that we've watched that we've given lower scores much lower scores that I definitely like more than this one. This is not one of my all-time favorites or anything like that, but it's undeniable in its craftsmanship, and it's a very well-made film, and it is a great film. So you could say a great American movie even.
He said the
I
thing.
said the thing. Well, did you want to look at what some other people thought about this? Some
Yes, let's
one
do
star
that.
and 5-star reviews.
in a, in our new
Our new
segment, which
segment.
will not have intro music, but I really wish I could come up with some right now. Bum, ba, ba, da, da, terrible reviews with Micaiah and Kyle.
I'm gonna cut that out and use that before every single section.
Please do.
Let's see. So this is. I'll start with a couple of 5-star reviews. I go to the Amazon DVD reviews because that's where you get the broadest range of opinions I've found. But this is a 5-star review where I'm just going to read the title of it because he goes into a whole long thing about it. But he said, point of the movie was unclear until the end. 5 stars.
I think the point of the movie was the most clear in the first half.
Yeah, like if it hit you at the end finally, great. But like it's kind of weird, like going through the whole movie being like, what am I watching? And then just like at the end you're like, oh, 5 stars is what that feels like to me. And then another 5-star review. No wonder Best Picture award. At least third time I've watched it since it was released. What can be said about perfection? Now to the 1-star reviews. Had to stop. Couldn't watch this anymore. I'm a fan of Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, etc. Great war movies. This is so unrealistic and filled with supposed to be funny one-liners. I could have made it through the movie if it wasn't shot so horribly. The camera bounces constantly to make it seem like the cameraman is running or filming secretly from afar. Horrible movie. So, yeah, pretty extreme negative.
Yeah.
There.
I would say just looking at cinematography and dialogue doesn't really like tell you everything about a movie.
It also backs up though that stylistically with like the docu style, it's not for everybody. You know, and I think this person might hate it a little bit too much, but
I find the Office's use of that a little bit cringy sometimes, but yeah, I see the innovative nature that The Office pulled off with the docu style TV series.
Yeah.
So you can't deny it was pretty innovative
right.
when it comes to comedy sitcoms. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
And this last 1-star review is, this is just plain stupid. Great fiction. Not a damn thing in this movie is real. Like a train wreck. Can't turn away. I would not call this movie that at all. Like, this person's like, this movie's embarrassingly bad almost. So I don't know how you walk away from this movie with that opinion. But hey, all respect to you. Whatever your feelings are on it, good for you. I do think it's funny though.
And if your feelings are wrong, good for you.
Yeah, and if your feelings are publicly stated on an online site,
we can make fun
then
of
I
you.
will make fun of you for it. So
yeah, exactly.
2 people
I didn't find anything funnier than that. So
2 people found this helpful, apparently. So
it's his 2 burner accounts, yeah.
Yeah, but
it's his split personality. his split personalities found it helpful.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All right, well, that does it for the conversation on The Hurt Locker.
I will note that Drew's score, obviously he didn't say anything about editing, so I took that away. He said it was a 14.5 out of 18.
Okay.
So 7.5 out of 9.
Okay. Cool.
Pretty close to our score.
Yeah, similar. Yeah.
What are we talking about next week, Micaiah?
Next week. All right. We've been doing a lot of horror films lately, and then you decided, because of the holiday coinciding with this release, that you do another heavier film in this situation. So I was like, I gotta lighten things up, and also we've been leaning a little masculine lately with the type of movies we've been talking about. So I'm gonna be bringing up one of my favorite movies to watch in the fall. It takes place throughout the course of the year, but I consider it more of a fall movie. And of our first rom-com, the show is When Harry Met Sally.
Okay. I have seen that movie.
Yeah. When was the last time you watched it?
Oh, good Lord.
It's been a while then.
Probably a decade and a half ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that it is still referenced to this day in romantic comedy trailers.
Yeah, it's got Billy Crystal.
Billy Crystal, and directed by Rob Reiner. So, yeah, I'm excited to go over that. It's been a couple years since I've watched it, but I do circle back to it pretty regularly. I quite enjoy that movie. So, different tone for us and a little bit cozier for the fall season now. So, yeah, that'll do it for us for this week on the show. We have new episodes every single Thursday, as well as non-spoiler reviews for new release movies. I'll be putting one out on Five Nights at Freddy's sometime. I should cut that out because that review will come up before this episode. But either way,
I'll put a timestamp.
Yeah, either way.
Thank you for giving me more work to do.
Either way, thanks for joining us for this discussion on The Hurt Locker. Join us next week for When Harry Met Sally, and we'll see.
Two completely similar
yes,
movies.
Very similar. We're all over the place on this show, but that's okay. What a great outro this is. We'll see you at the movies.
I'm leaving all of it in.
All right, bye.